Good morning, Wildcats. So here we are talking about history, and so I want to start off with a good question, and that would be, what is the point? Why do we study history? And we always should approach this at the beginning of every year. It's called historiography, basically, the study of why we study history. So some thoughts on it. So here is Malcolm X, civil rights leader from the 1960s. And as it says, the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. So the idea is that you always have to be thinking about your future, but also remembering the past. And in that, you have to look back at Dr. Martin Luther King here. He says, we are not makers of history, but we are made by history. So it's interesting how the history of the past continues to speak to us today. So, another thought, the less important person here, this is Michael Crichton. And he says, if you don't know history, then you don't know anything. If you're a leaf that doesn't know it is part of a tree, and you're like, what does that mean? Well, I think you understand that you are part of a larger piece of society. So you might be thinking, who is Michael Crichton? Well, you might have recognized this image up here. He's the man who came up with the author of Jurassic Park. So kind of a very famous writer of popular fiction. So moving on, as you can sort of see, all days are pretty much anniversaries of important events. So let's go through a few as we reflect on this first week of school. So today should be around August 24th. Maybe it was yesterday, but just as an anniversary, let's take a look here. As you look here, there's a building that's in flames. Perhaps you might know what that structure is. And then you can sort of see here, you can get some details of this picture here. You can sort of see red and white, and hopefully you know what that event is. So I want you to think on that. Okay, did anyone hopefully say the burning of the White House during the War of 1812? So it's always fun to talk about what was going on. So way back in 1814, this is when the White House was burned by the British during our second war with them. So let's do August 25th, 1939. Seems like a long time ago. So let's take a look here. I think everyone can recognize what that is. So on August 25th, 1939, The Wizard of Oz came out to the masses. So this was a huge movie. One of the biggest things, of course, because it was in full color. That was a huge thing back then. So why was the event important? Well, it's the first time that large numbers of people could go to the movies and see a story told in full and brilliant color. All right, let's continue on. Let's take another look here. So hopefully you can sort of see the date. Hopefully I'm not keeping you out of it. But August 26, 1920, and that is when women got the right to vote. So this year is a huge historic year for all the other things, but this is the 100th anniversary, the centennial of women voting in the United States of America. So a huge accomplishment. Too bad that it took this long for our country to reach that idea of all people being able to vote. Moving ahead to the next day, so Thursday of this week will mark an important anniversary too. So let's take a look here. Let's go to the next slide. August 27th, 1910. So if you look up here at the heading, Mr. Edison works on a new device. Well, the Mr. Edison that they're talking about, of course, is, yes, Thomas Edison. And I've highlighted right here, it says moving pictures that talk. So what is that? Well, this is the emergence of the moving pictures, or the movie camera is first used. So basically put out by the Thomas Edison Company in West Orange. So a huge movement. Think about your life without movies. And the 27th of August 1910 is a celebration of that. So again, we have to always ask, why is that event important? Well, again, think about movies and how much they have had an impact on your life, on American culture, on the world. So the idea is that started way back in 1910, and it goes forward from there. So let's move on to the next one. This is a quote from, obviously, Abe Lincoln, as you see down here at the bottom, our 16th president. We cannot escape history. And you really have to think on, what does that saying mean? How can you get away from history? And as this past 5 to 6 months has proven, history is always with us. So as we look back, we look towards this picture, and most of you should be able to recognize that this would be Dr. King, and this is 1963, and this is his March on Washington. But what it also is it's an anniversary by the time this weekend rolls around, by Friday, that marks an anniversary. So he went and gave his famous I Have a Dream speech on August 28th, 1963. And it's amazing how sometimes these historical events still affect us and impact us today. We look at it with new eyes each year. So we could not forecast and understand the ramifications of the remarks of Dr. King way back in 1963, and yet here we are in 2020, and we are still dealing with the impacts of all Americans trying to achieve equal rights under the law. We're going to move on and talk about some other events. So September 1st, 1985, as you can see up here, the wreck of the Titanic is found right off the New England coast. You can sort of see it here. So most of you have probably seen, I'm guessing, the movie Titanic, which kind of popularized it again. So here it is. And that would be the bow of the ship. Okay, and you probably already know the characters that you're thinking of right here at the front of the ship. So that was discovered September 1st, 1985. If you know your history, you know that the Titanic sank April 14th/15th, 1912, and so it was lost to history for 70 plus years, 73 years, until it was discovered by a very famous ocean explorer by the name of Robert Ballard. And so he basically was out looking for it. If you study the history, you also know that he was out looking for something else that the United States government wanted him to find, but you'd have to do some research on that and figure out what that was. So let's move on. September 1st, 1939. I know I'm jumping around here, but that was the start of World War II begins. And World War II really began on that day because Germany invaded Poland. And when it invaded Poland, Great Britain over here decided that it must come to the aid of its ally and declared war upon Germany. France also then declared war upon Germany, and World War II had begun. So as you see, this was from the Los Angeles Times. Extra, extra, German troops invade Poland. So as we always keep going back to the same question, why is that event important? Well, that event, of course, begins the second greatest world war the United States had ever been involved in, and changes the entire concept of world order and everything that has come from that. So from changes in mechanization, industrialization, democracy, all those types of things were impacted on that day. So again, anniversaries, every day is an anniversary of something. So you can't rewrite history, but you can impact the future. So try and think on those major themes here. Going back and not rewriting history, but looking at it and understanding it and trying to learn from it. Now, really simple question.